So,
It's coming up.
okay, I see it.
It's setting it up right now. So that's why I was waiting before. Let me lower the volume on that because it's gonna echo back to the session.
All right, got it.
Give me 1 second. Nice. Okay, very good. I muted it. All righty. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. This is take number 3 of our session, our virtual session this evening. And as I mentioned in the beginning previously, we've started this community conversation series after last year, where we had a similar conversation series with candidates that were running in our community, globally speaking, in the United States. So, for instance, Claudette, David, who's here, Ms. Claudette David was one of our speakers, or first speakers, when she was running as a commissioner, and we'll be introducing her shortly. So our intent, the Association of Asian Professionals, in kicking off this new series is really to stay engaged as a community with our elected or appointed officials that represent the constituents' interests. And we wanted to essentially begin to kind of check in with them and see how things are going, understand the role that they play with their environment, their work, the nature of their work, their scope of responsibility, and our best as constituents in the community where they're representing our interests to engage them in the limits of what they can do and what they cannot do, understand those, and try to understand the process as well to stay engaged and be empowered as a community to make a change and ensure that the change that we elect those officials or those who are appointed to represent us, those changes can happen and where the limitations are and how best we can sometimes escalate within the hierarchy of authority to get the result that we are seeking. So for us, that essentially is the beginning process for this kind of conversation. And this evening, we begin with the topic of Haitian women in politics, featuring 2 distinguished speakers. As I mentioned earlier, we have Claudette David and Jennifer Blemmer, excuse me. And before we begin the session, wanted to kind of go highlight some disclaimers. For us, the material presented here is for general informational purposes only. All information activities provided in connection with this event are intended for community educational purposes and in no way represent or reflect endorsement for or opposition to any official, candidate, or political party. Any views or opinions expressed by a speaker represent solely the views and opinions of the individual speaker and have no bearing in relation to the individual's employer or AHP, if any. So that's kind of making sure that we understand this is primarily as part of our mission as a community organization, AHP. We want to make sure our constituents are informed and stay engaged with their representatives. So the session today is being facilitated by myself. I'll introduce myself. I'm Gilles Charleston. I am a member of the board of the Association of Asian Professionals. And in that capacity, I will help curate this conversation and facilitate engagement of questions once the speakers have had an opportunity to kind of, in a short address of who they are, what they represent, and then we can engage in an interactive fashion with this conversation. Again, it's a community conversation. So just wanted to kind of guide our conversation moving forward. So the first speaker we'll introduce is Ms. Claudette David. She's a community builder for democratic values with 15 plus years of experience in congressional, international campaign, and nonprofit sectors, elected on November 3rd, 2020 for a 2-year term as an advisory neighborhood commissioner in a district of 2,000 residents to monitor constituent complaints, initiate proposal for government action, conduct programs for the welfare of the community, and to give advice to the office of the mayor, members of the DC City Council, and local government agencies. Ms. David is concurrently the executive director of the DC Democratic State Committee. Prior to joining the DC Democratic Party, Ms. David served at the US Congress, where notably she worked as an intern for Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Democrat from California. She then worked at the US Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs supporting staff. In 2016, Ms. David has led numerous federal, state, local campaigns in Colorado, Virginia, and Maryland, working directly with constituents to empower and encourage civic participation in the democratic party. Ms. David earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in International Relations from George Mason and is a former Peace Corps volunteer in Gabon, in Africa. So without further ado, introducing Ms. Claudette David. You're on, Claudette.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, AHP. Thank you for everyone who's joining us tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. And I thank everyone who supported me during my campaign as well. It was a very emotional experience. It was the first time that I've ever taken a leap and just put myself out there and asked people for money for fundraising. And I was able to raise about $1,300, and I spent about $1,600. So I raised a good amount. And then, I won, and that was just a really good feeling. So thank you, everyone, for your support. Right now we're showing a slide of where the location is. And so my district, again, covers the northern part of Connecticut Avenue, and it covers 2,000 people. I've got about 100 single family homes, and then there's three like high-rise buildings with multiple family units. And so that's where most of my constituents are in those buildings. And since then, we have monthly meetings, and so we have monthly meetings amongst all the other commissioners, because I have like a small sliver of Upper Northern Connecticut Avenue, but there are other people that cover other parts of Forest Hills, where I live, and the Cleveland Park area. And it's called just 3F. And then I just take 3F05. And there's 7 of us. And so we have monthly meetings. I do something separate for my own constituents, which is what I've been working on currently. So, our current issues are, right now there's going to be bike lanes on Connecticut Avenue. I have businesses in my district, and so I'm working with them on some street things that they want to do. And then building managers in the district I live in have other issues with, because of COVID, with rent payment and everything. And so, I've been working with them and local liaison offices on helping to solve some of the issues that come up in my district. And thank you so much. I don't know if we're going into Q&A now, or what we want to do next.
So we probably wanted to have Jennifer do a few minutes of address and conversation, and then probably engage, because probably more than likely when we open the session, we may have question for both of you. So I think that's the best way to move forward. So thank you for your short presentation on your running campaign and the successes and where you are right now in terms of the activities you're doing in the community. Claudette, I will proceed and introduce Jennifer Blemmer next. Thank you. And then after that, we can probably engage with Q&A directly from the community members or those who are attending to ask questions. So the next speaker, as part of this Haitian Women in Politics topic, we have Ms. Jennifer Blemmer. She's committed to advancing the public welfare. She's the State Caucus Network Director for Millennial Action Project. Jennifer's goal in working in state policies to ensure that elected officials not only know what's happening in their communities, but are equipped with sensible legislative solutions. Collaborating with elected officials to create transformative change is core to Jennifer's belief that government can effectively meet the needs of its people. Jennifer previously served as the director of the Women's Legislators Lobby, WIL, a program of women's action for new directions. WIL is a national nonpartisan network of women state legislators who work together to influence federal policy and budget priorities. Prior to WIL, Jennifer served as a legislative counsel of the District of Columbia, where she drafted legislation, met with stakeholders, and helped community members. Her work in state policy began with the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. A licensed attorney living in the District of Columbia, is a graduate of the David A. Clark School of Law, a native New Yorker, a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, and a first-generation Asian American. Without further ado, Ms. Jennifer Blemmer. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you. First, wanted to extend my gratitude to AHP for having me and also to Claudette for recommending me. So thank you. So the bio is a lot. We can talk about how I got into policy at some point, but I'm here in my capacity as president of the DC Young Democrats. The DC Young Democrats is a chartered unit with the Young Democrats of America, which is the youth arm 14 to 36 of the Democratic Party. And so what we do here in DC, our main mission is just getting young people involved in the democratic process and also supporting Democratic candidates in the district. What we are doing this year is really focusing on cultivating young talent, young leadership here in DC. In my experience as president, going on from last year into this year, I've had a really great opportunity to learn more about the Democratic Party here in DC, get really connected with people who are powerhouses who I would have never known had it not been for this opportunity just to work with them and sort of kind of see how the sausage is made, so to speak, in just understanding politics. Politics is not a thing that I ever thought I would be involved in. I was just supposed to be a regular lawyer because that's it, right? You're either a lawyer, an engineer, or a nurse. I am bad at math and I did not want to be a nurse. So lawyer was the only other option. But it's really been really educational and informative experience. I've lived in DC for 11, going on 12 years. And I've seen the city change just in, that last 10 years of being there. And so being a part of this organization has really given me an opportunity to learn more about how I can help people in my community understand the community I was there before, and be a part of building a community after I leave. And so with the DC Young Democrats, really what we want to do is get everybody from all 8 wards connected and involved. I don't know if you all saw the census numbers, but the average, I believe people from 30 to 39 make up the bulk of the city. And so those are young people that are going to be shaping what our political landscape looks like over the next couple of years. And so we're trying to make sure that we're reaching out to them and also reaching out to organizations that are here already so that they have the next generation of leaders and workers. So super excited to be here and talk about this experience. Again, I'm from New York, so I didn't even know that Haitian people lived outside of New York or Miami. So it's happy to find community here in DC.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. And with that said, I guess we can engage directly into our interaction. So I guess on my end as facilitator, one first question that comes to mind is to both our speakers, our panelists here, and to a good extent, your representation right now is very regional and very local, and wanted to get your perspective as first generation Asian Americans, I believe both of you are, in the political stream. What have you learned so far in your political journey you feel you can share with our audience, our Haitian community here on this session, globally speaking, that are engaged in the US politics, that they could piggyback on and quickly increase their presence in the political spectrum of the United States. And then we have a question from an audience that I want to entertain afterwards. I don't know which one of you want to answer first, but that was the first question.
Claudette should go first.
Oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
Honestly, I would say that you have to leave your house. You have to get connected with people. You know, I know for some people it's l'école, l'église, la caille, like, but you have to leave those places and get connected and talk with people. And give yourself an opportunity to showcase what your talents are, because people do see them. And like, be supportive when people call it out. I know that's a challenge for me, just letting myself be recognized. But if you want to really get involved in politics or policy in a significant way, it does require you putting yourself out there and like having people notice you. And so you have to put yourself out there.
Yep, and I second that. Also, in putting yourself out there, it's also just being okay with just reaching out to people, and also not, and also just being open to doing stuff that just doesn't pay at all. Just anything that's pretty free. I mean, we're both in unpaid positions doing what we're doing, so it's, you know, pretty much, you know, service leadership through service. And that pretty much helps, it helps grow your network of people and knowing the opportunities that are out there when you actually just put yourself out there and just actively engage.
Gilles, you're on mute and someone has their hand up.
Thank you so much, Gracious. Thank you very much, Claudette and Jennifer, for your responses. We have someone on the chat with a question. Verlaine, you want to unmute your microphone and ask your question?
Jill, do you want to remove the
slide?
PowerPoint? Yeah.
No problem. Verlaine, can you hear me? Verlaine Polius, you have a question. Go ahead.
Okay, it appears as if he's frozen. So
Okay.
let's move on.
So
and
in the meantime, a next follow-up to what the first question initially, there is a National Haitian American Elected Officials Network, NEON. As both of you are elected or appointed Haitian American officials, are you guys part of that network? Are you guys have not looked into that network yet? Are you guys aware of them and engaging them by any chance?
I've never heard of them. What's the name of it again?
National Haitian American Elected Official Network, NEON. And they are based in I believe their main office is actually in Florida. And I believe Jean Monnet's team, who's a commissioner from I forgot which specific city or district city in Florida, is actually their chairperson, Jean Monnet's team. But they essentially began in the latter part of 2010 as an organizational network to build a large connection network between all the elected officials of Haitian descent who are within the echelon of US politics. So, for example, Attorney General Carl Racine is a member. They have mayors from Texas. For example, there's a Haitian American who's a mayor in Texas. I forgot what city specifically. I know he was on there too. If you guys remember Dotsi from DC, Joseph, who's now a state legislator from in Florida. she's also a member. So that's why I mentioned that. So that was my next question, if you guys were. But that's who they are, Neon. The reason for the question is obviously trying to put in context to what extent as a people, because we know our community is very scattered. We have a lot of different social, or I would say community activism that when it comes to the US politics, that are not necessarily strong. And unfortunately, we know about the US politics, or we get engaged in US politics when there's an issue, whether it was AIDS, the AIDS FDA ban of the 1990s, which caused 300,000 Haitians to march on Brooklyn Bridge. I remember that I was there, but oftentimes we don't get as engaged in the US politics. And oftentimes because of that, our representation doesn't show for that reason. And we only remember there's a US politics when something hit home, whether it's Haiti, there's something going on and we want to do a demonstration, and that's oftentimes. So I think looking at it from that angle, from your experience, both of you, as you look involvement of our people into politics, what do you think are some of the pain points to get us to cross that bridge and be more active and engaged?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
What last time? I went first last time. So I'm gonna let you go first this time.
I would say I would say, I like this idea of the Haitian American Elected Official Network, but it becomes really important for us to unite on issue areas, because it's clear that we're, a lot of Haitian Americans are participating in US politics, and we understand we understand political theory and how to get things done in the US. So it's a different level of understanding. The key though is, Haitian politics, it's a different culture. I joke with someone that if I ever tried to do anything with Haiti, I just wouldn't make it, because it's just you just have to go by different rules. And, there are unspoken rules in US politics. But for those of us that are already engaged, is to basically kind of just work together, figure out issue areas that we could kind of tackle and work together on. Jennifer, your thoughts?
So I would say it's kind of like just three different things, right? The first being proactive versus reactive. People who generally are not in power are always reacting to the things people in power do. And so that requires us shifting that mindset, is just to be proactive. Like before they even, instituted this thing, like what were we doing to make sure that we were aware of it, which is leading into the second part, which is just education. We really have to make sure that we are on par with what's going on around us, that it requires us knowing who our city council people are, who's our county commissioner, who's the dog catcher, who's the zone. There are so many levels to government that people utilize every day that we are not aware of until we're on the other end of something bad happening, that we have to really take that chance to really educate ourselves on all of the levers that occur. I mean, and that's a lot, right? So I know that's a thing that I'm passionate about, is just talking to people about how to utilize their government, understanding that people are coming from Haiti where what does that even mean, levels of government? There is no level of government. For some people, their one level of government was the dictator or the president or whomever, right? And so just having that sort of process of education. And then the other part is just owning our narrative and understanding that. One of the major things about what's happening at the border is that the narrative, of course, is it's all Central Americans coming in, trying to cross the border illegally. And we know that's not an accurate sort of statement. We know that there are Haitians there. We know that there are Haitian communities in Mexico because they've been stuck there for years. There are people who have come as far as Africa from Cameroon who come through Central America to Mexico to get to the United States. And we are not owning that narrative. We are not putting ourselves out there in front of that narrative. We make our narrative very relegated to things that affect us and only us. And we are not sharing that story with people so that they can understand that immigration is as much a Black issue as anything else. And so we really need to make sure that we're being proactive in our education and also controlling our stories and our narrative. And I think that would make the difference in how we engage in politics here in the United States. You're muted again, Ju.
Sorry, very good point, both of you, and thank you for those responses. And the way you engage on the immigration, which was going to be the next question for both of you, since both of you are in DC, how much is the immigration issues facing the Asian community do you get exposed to, or in your respective roles?
My role is hyper local. You know, I'm dealing with renewing, you know, either renewing or blocking of renewal of alcohol licenses for businesses. Or, you know, I'm dealing with permits and, you know, so that issue has not, immigration issues has not, any immigration issues don't come into play in my position as a commissioner.
Thank you.
And then for Young Democrats of America, I know that there has been conversations about how we can support people who do not have paperwork in voting in elections, whether it's like local or general. It's an evolving conversation, of course. A lot of young people are dreamers. And so for the larger organization, that is something that they do focus on and just bring attention to, because we do want equity and fairness and fair and just immigration policies. So YDA does push on that. Here in DC, it does not come up as much in the way I think maybe you're thinking about. It's really more of like, how do we just make sure that we have programming that is like accessible for people? So, you know, and it's difficult to say like, okay, well, we're going to have someone who can translate in Spanish and Amharic and Arabic or Creole, like, you know, that takes time and like resources for us to pull together. Is that something that we want to be able to provide? Yes, absolutely. Is that something that we are trying to put together? For sure. But, you know, we're all young people. Everybody has like full-time jobs. This is not paid. And even if it was paid, I don't know if I would be able to deliver on that. But that is something in conversation that we do sort of talk about and try to figure out like legitimate strategies for us to try to like find some solutions for.
Right. Okay, thank you. So both of your roles, or both your role, Jennifer, in the State Democratic Party, and your role as a commissioner, Claudette, are they non-paid roles or are they paid roles?
They're both on unpaid roles.
Yeah, unpaid
Yep.
roles, okay. And the other question is, how much of your time does that consume as unpaid roles?
A lot. So so my position is really interesting because it's an elected position, and I spoke with, because there's an office that helps guide us through everything. You know, I said, you know, is this officially, you know, a full-time position? And he couldn't say, because, you know, it's no one can just say that they're the commissioner of my area and just try to do what I do, because they're just not officially me. You know what I mean? They weren't elected into that position. And then I get requests and everything all the time. And so it's a matter of just finding time, building the schedule to get things done, because it can get busy. You know, there's other commissioners in the city, and, you know, what they'll try to do is do like some citywide resolutions on different things that's not hyper local, like, you know, stopping Asian hate and just during the inauguration, they wanted to, there was a resolution on preventing Airbnbs from renting out their spaces. And so you get pulled into different things, and basically there's just a lot of emails in my inbox. And so it's full-time, and it's unpaid, and but it's a lot of, it's utilizing different skills that I haven't been using. I definitely don't use much of it in just my regular life. And so it's a way to pretty much leverage this opportunity and the things I'm doing into something else. I don't know what that other thing is yet, but it's a good way for me to see how well I could do with working with constituents, resolving issues, and still kind of having, being able to handle like any citywide issues that might come into play.
Okay, thank you.
It's hard to say. I like to feel like I don't spend, my 5 to 9 hours on it, because I'm like just really involved in other organizations. So I do try to split my time up as much as I can. There's of course lots of meetings. I think even more now since we can't meet in person the way that we could. So it's just like, let's have a meeting. So I would say it's more of that. And then really, I've spent the last month capacity building, reaching out to people to serve as committee chairs for our committees, just so that we have more people to do the work, and it's not a select few of people who do it by default, but really just more people who are involved with us, so that we're also getting fresh ideas and we're not recycling through the same set of 4 people who are talking about programming. So I try not to make it my entire evening. Some days I win that battle, some days I do not.
Okay. Wanted to offer, thank you, Jennifer, thank you, Claudette. Wanted to offer anyone on the chat if they wanted to ask a question. Let me see, I think we have a question. Let me read it out. One second. As young Haitians in politics, if you could change some of the issues in Haiti, how would you change it? I don't know if any one of you want to take that question.
I can go first. I would say, I don't know if, I would say politics itself. So the interesting thing about what Jennifer and I are doing is that it's a very American thing to have like these leadership community positions that still kind of moves society forward in a way that you don't see in like a Haiti. I've lived in Gabon, Central Africa, and it really helps. And these are countries that consider themselves democracies. And it really helps with it's a sense of just being a part of society, the community, down to the local level, and being engaged. And I would kind of instill like this, just a culture of being engaged in the community to help move it forward. Just teaching like that political mindset early. Because I think in Haiti, just, a lot of it would be just really getting people engaged on a local level. And just even the young people, just on a small scale to just get things done instead of just kind of being like just the one person handles all type thing. Because, people start to feel powerless. That's one thing I think I would want to change, is the culture of how things are done in Haiti, or how people are able to engage in society in Haiti.
I would agree. And maybe sort of drill it down to, I wish that there I wish that there was viability in a woman running for president and like actually being president. I just, in the work that I used to do before, where I worked with women elected officials, there's a lot of data out there to support that. Like women generally just are different kind of leaders than men are. They build consensus. They focus on legislation that is geared towards the community, children, education, schools, but also like can consider different ways in which we look at defense and national security. And I think that, you know, Haiti is just due for something different. And they've been doing it so long. And I think there's something to be said about just empowering a different kind of person who is coming at it from a different perspective. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a one size fits all, but I do wish that there was some viability there. I know that I went to brunch with some other Haitian ladies on Saturday. We were talking about it and we are like, nah, they would get her the moment she declared they would just get her, like she would just disappear. Which is unfortunate, but like there's like people at a fundamental level, like people trust women. They just don't realize that they trust women. So like, why not trust the woman to lead the country?
Thank you, both of you. Actually, I guess as facilitator, if I may add, in the recent 35 years of Haiti since Duvalier left, actually, the short time where we had I would say the best election is actually a woman who was president, and that was Erta Pascal Trouillot. She was the president of the Supreme Court, equivalent of the US here in Haiti. I believe, I'm sorry, I take that back. Maybe she was I can't remember exactly whether she was the president at the time or she was the next in line, but at any rate, she was the one who became president. And people have memories of her running the country and running a transitional government to make things happen. And I think right now, as you mentioned so eloquently, Jennifer, Haiti is definitely due for something different because we've been trying what we've been doing for the past 34, 35 years. As someone who follows it daily, I can honestly agree with you 300%. So I do think actually, as much as I know Haitian politics is bare bones and knuckles and it's rough and rumble, excuse me. I do think actually it's due time for a woman, to be honest with you. So for me, actually, I would put all my weight behind a woman and any credible one that comes out there. I see it's the time. So just
make sure you pay for her security team.
I'm sorry?
Make sure you pay for her security team because
without a doubt.
Get her.
Without a doubt. Whoever it is, whoever you put in power, you got to have your own security circles for sure. But just to say that, you know, I echo your sentiment. As I am the opposite gender, but nonetheless, I agree with you 300%. I think it's overdue. And I think even in the social structure of the society, the role that a woman plays as a potomitan, as we all know, it's such a determining factor to why the society, the Haitian family has a good strength because of the mother, because of the mom that runs everything in the background. And people sometimes may not even realize the true potomitan is there. And if we didn't have that potomitan, I can only fathom how things would have been worse than what it is currently. So anyway, just wanted to kind of echo that sentiment as well. I don't think we have any more questions right now, but one thing that I think both of you touched on, immigration is definitely one of the issues in the US for Haitian community. Getting involved in politics, we touched on that as well. I would say the other part that I don't know to what extent you feel comfortable venturing into that from a Haitian community interest is what about collaborating with other communities in order to get more political presence or political representation? Because oftentimes, since we're not yet there in terms of the engagement, as you acknowledge, the issues we have are specific single issues like immigration, for instance, and obviously Haiti, and in general, in terms of the policies that the US may influence onto Haiti. How do you see Haitian as a community in terms of collaborating with other communities to increase their electoral power or presence or influence? Is that something that's feasible? Is there any reference of other communities that maybe we can use as a model to consider for our purposes of our community? Any one of you can answer.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
So that is for sure viable and possible. And I think just like a small example is that a couple of years ago, this was, I think, 2013, 14, there were a lot of bills that were being introduced in state legislatures about just having voting materials in different languages. Because there are parts of America where people hate that people speak other languages beside English. And I think that was an opportunity there for the Haitian community, Latinx community, Arab, anyone who does speak multiple languages to sort of come together and say, listen, we have the right to participate in the electoral process. Can we speak English? Sure. Can we read it? Absolutely. But it would be easier for us and like provide us greater access if you just provided these materials in different languages. And that's an opportunity, and you know, that's a small example, but that's an example of ways in which we can collaborate with different communities. You know, census numbers came out today, and that's going to change a lot about a couple of states because they're going to have more numbers. They're going to have more seats, excuse me, in Congress. Some states lost some seats. And so what is that going to mean for representation? Like, outside of immigration, like, people fundamentally have the same sort of goals, right? Like, everybody wants to get up, have a safe and healthy life for themselves and their families, like at a fundamental level. What does that mean can vary from person to person, but ultimately that's what we want to do. And I think what we've seen in the last 4 years has been a lot of this sort of manufactured nationalism about what it means to be American and what it means to look like an American. And I think a lot of communities are sort of seeing that. You're getting a lot more people experiencing sort of these like xenophobic attacks where it's like, speak English, and it's like, are you mad that I can speak more than one language? Like I mean, you shouldn't be, because that's actually like a global norm for people to be able to speak more than one language. And so I think that's just a chance for us to kind of work together to, again, really, you know, control our narrative and own that narrative and say, like, listen, like, we are trying to just live the same safe and healthy lives that like everybody else is doing. And like, and what does that really mean for us? If we're trying to constantly shout to the wind, we can definitely collaborate with other communities to make our point stronger.
And I don't know if we have a political action committee or anything, we need something where we could actually, an organization that will help lead us forward and help to just kind of own that narrative. That Jennifer, you speak a lot about owning the narrative, which is really, is so true. But there's so many different groups amongst the Haitian community that I don't know if the groups work together to formulate a narrative. You know, do you need to create just one other group to encompass everyone else? I know a lot of, ethnic groups, other groups have their own political action committees, which is how they're able to have influence, because there's money there. There's money backing the issue, which then backs a political person who then makes the decisions on these things, on legislation that impacts the Haitian community in America. So that's just another way to do it, is to really think about getting the Haitian community together to just devise what is our national issue.
That's a very good point. Both
it's our platform for the next 4 years.
Correct.
Like the DNC does, has several platforms that they have every 4 years. And that's what they work towards every 4 years. Does the Haitian community have that?
Yeah, that's a very good advice, worthy of consideration. To have the community have a political action committee representing their interests and building I don't want to say a laundry list of issues that are worthy of the community, but definitely some key issues that are important to the Haitian community nationally in the United States. To both of you, this question, what is the current critical issues that you are working on that lend itself to issues that the Haitian community could find of interest to them and that could get them engaged? Is there any such issues that you're currently facing in your work, in your current activities or focus or tasks that you're working on right now?
I just started this year, so I'm still figuring out the basics right now. And then it's like I could branch out. But right now it's, especially under COVID and not being able to really do more to engage everybody who voted for me. Right now, I'm just trying to get the basics down. And then I could do other things and just be more creative with my position because I can work with other organizations. I can work with people across the city. I could do a lot of things, but I got to start first with just the basics. It's only been like 4, 5, 6 months maybe. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your candor.
And as I said, with DC Young Dems, like we are looking to just, again, cultivate young talent, government accountability, building connections and networks, of course, advocating for DC statehood and like voter engagement and registration. So as concepts, I think those are things that people could be involved in and interested in. Again, we're here in DC, so we also track the legislation that's coming out of the council. So anything that is like particularly relevant or important to young people is something that we look at. I think just going back to a point that Claudette had made earlier about there being just sort of like programming to get young people in Haiti like involved in just just near political training, I think is something that we're really interested in doing and just building up leadership. Again, like at some point the leaders that we're following now are not going to be here anymore, and we want to connect with the people that are trying to pour into young people and build for the next generation. And I think Haiti really could benefit from that. Just people, because it's there, it's not like it's not. There are, of course, young people who see what's going on and they're trying to make a change. They're not waiting for missionaries to come provide help. They're trying to do it themselves, but it's, of course, challenging for them because no one is teaching them anything. Or if they are, they're teaching them the old ways that don't serve a greater purpose. They just serve the individual. So that's what I would think.
And in my position, actually, just to Jennifer's point on engaging, just getting more young people involved, I do need a lot of help with my position. I mean, if anyone even checked my website, you could see it's still not updated. So I definitely still need a lot of help with just building just my social media presence. But what that does is that provides someone experience in what actually happens on the local level. The behind the scenes things that is actually, hard skills useful in the real world, like useful for nonprofits. You're always looking for someone who already knows how to use Wix if you're interested in communications. And you actually have things that you can show them that you've done. And that's what, as somebody who's thinking about going into working in politics, those are some of the things to just get your foot in the door to just experience it.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Claudette. I think for us, maybe that's an area where if we know of any young high schoolers or graduating or even young college who are looking for some opportunity to volunteer their services or their time to the political apparatus that governs us, for lack of a better term, definitely will sway them your way and see to what extent, especially right now with things being virtual, really may not require any physical, but definitely virtually they could be supportive and help you in your role and learning some of the ropes through you and your experience working with you. So definitely we'll keep that in mind as well. Are there such opportunities on your end too, Jennifer, or not?
Yeah, DC Young Dems is always looking for young people to get involved and build capacity to bring their ideas, and just to like get engaged with us. There's an election in Virginia later this year, and so we want to make sure that like we are involved in that. And of course, there are some open seats next year here in DC for the council. So, you know, that'll be its own special journey. And so we want people to get involved in those races with us as well. And as we support candidates that come out for the open seats next year.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll maybe talk with you separately for those who express an interest in connecting with those kind of experiences or opportunities for volunteering their time. We have a question from the chat. It's for Claudette. What are your thoughts on statehood for DC?
I've been doing a lot of this work wearing my other hat as the executive director of the DC Democratic Party. And definitely I'm definitely for DC statehood. Don't know yet how it will change the commissioner, because it's every 2,000 people in the city has a commissioner. That will probably stick. I mean, they're going to add, I think, 2 members of the council. So there'll just be more elected positions for DC because there'll be a representation in the Senate, House, and then more people in just the local government. But where the DC Democratic Party is going to be, we're going to have phone banks. We're looking at a phone bank soon. We've been talking to Senator Copper's office, who's been leading the way in the Senate, who is actually my former boss. And he's hoping to do a committee markup in May. So we'll see if it'll go through the Senate before the August recess. But they're trying to get a couple senators to sign on, like Angus King, who's an independent from Maine, and the Maine Democratic Party passed a resolution in support of DC statehood. So we'll try to see if we can get constituents from Maine to call Angus King to sign on to the Senate bill. And we're going to try to do that with a couple other states to get them to sign on to the bill, because that's where we are right now. We just need the Senate to pass it, but we've just got to get some senators to do it. And the way to do that, it's all strategy, right? They listen to their constituents because their constituents are the ones who give them their job. Like they're the ones who vote for them. So we try to influence their constituents. So that's the strategy that we're working on right now.
Okay. Thank you. Jennifer, would you want to add anything? Or I know the question was directed to Claudette, but you're in DC as well. So
yeah, I too support DC statehood. The end.
And then the DC Young Dems, they're an affiliate organization of the DC Democratic Party. And the DC Democratic Party is under the Democratic National Committee, the DNC. And so, and there's 57 executive directors in the country. There's 57 because there's 50 states and like 7 territories. I think I have those numbers right. So basically we work to make sure that statehood is part of the DNC's platform. We did that last year, talking about, going back to how do you influence politics and policy. On this level, the DC Democrats were able to influence national-wide Democratic Party in making sure that DC statehood was part of the platform. We worked hard to make sure that the current president, Biden, was vocal about his support for DC statehood. So that's where we are in that. So follow the DC Democratic Party to know more about how you can help with that.
Thank you. This question is for Jennifer. Since you mentioned there's an election coming up in Virginia, where can we find local elections information?
So I'm assuming that's for Virginia, but that would be with the Virginia Department of Elections. As far as I know, the entire legislature is up for election this year, and I believe the Republican convention is this weekend or next month, and there is a primary in June for governor. And so there are a couple of people running for governor. And as far as like going down to the local states, the local, you could probably find it on like your county websites in Virginia for more information, or depending on which party you were with, that party's website would have information on like what seats and positions were up and like how you would get information about filing and also deadlines.
Okay, thank you. So we've been at this for almost an hour, I think. I wanted to give an opportunity if anyone else has a question that maybe they didn't write it or they wanted to call it out. Anyone on the bridge, on the chat, wishes to ask a question, here's an opportunity now. Okay, no response. So my last concluding point to both of you. It's a two-part question. It's any aspirations for more politics beyond this current opportunity that you are currently working on? And second part is, any takeaway or advice to fellow Haitians who may be looking up to you, your experience as political leaders in the US system, as to how they maintain their composure, their voice, so that they have a voice that helps to shape the narrative moving forward. Thank you.
Jennifer.
To your first question, no. The second question, I think, is something that's important is that, one, make sure they say your name right. People will always try to pretend like they don't know how to say it. They know how to say it. So make sure they say it right. That would be one. And second, in terms of like our experience, I think as first generation Americans, third culture kid, however you want to frame it, we're at a unique position because we've experienced sort of what it's like to be here, and also the immigrant experience, whether you came here as a little kid or your parents came, because it feels the same. Like it just does, in a very sort of like hard to describe kind of way. And I think that sort of understanding is very, it's essential when you're dealing in politics. The work that I do now at Millennial Action Project is really focused on like building empathetic leaders, and really focusing on like how we can sort of discard those like old conventions of the political process and refocus on what it's supposed to be, which is like helping people. Having people understand that, like, especially if you grew up in a household where your parents did not really speak English and you had to speak English for them, how much like that shapes who you are as a young person. Like, you know a lot more than you ought to know because you have to do that work. And so when we're talking about introducing bills because we care about children, you being in the room to say like, well, wait a minute, I just want to share with you, children in my community or the way that I grew up, like speaking to bill collectors or whomever, like that's normal for us. And we understand that you're trying to say like children shouldn't be involved in that, or decisions shouldn't be held to that, or, you know, they can't be in the doctor's office with their parents. But like if they're not, their parents can be taken advantage of because they can't speak English that well, or like they need somebody to translate. And that's not exclusive to Haitian children, right? Like again, Latinos, anybody who has a parent who speaks another language or English isn't their first language has had that same experience. And so I would say for anyone who is considering politics or policy, you should do it because like your experience in being in that intersection is something that is like sorely needed in American politics. I think it definitely builds a lot more empathy in a person, just having to be there to sort of be that translator, or like really understanding that like, okay, you're American outside of the house. When you're inside the house, you're Haitian, and like this is what it is. And like we just need more people who have that ability to see those intersections. So if you're considering running, definitely run. I'm not considering running before you even ask the question, but I am happy to support other people who are running.
Will you run another term?
I will actually be aging out of Young Dems.
Oh.
Yes, I will be a not so young Dem. I'm still a young person, but like not according to Young Dems.
Okay.
So I will be in the out to pasture Dems. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, will you be a member of the DC Democratic Party?
Sure. I love to be a general member.
Like
showing up.
Is the Ward Dem or Ward Dem?
Ward 5 Dems. I'm actually a part of the Ward 5 Dems, and it's been a great experience. Learned a lot about the ward and the people in it. So I'm always continuing to look forward to learn more about the things and people around me.
Jill, what was your second and third question? It was, will you run?
So basically, if you have aspiration, the first question was if you have aspiration into more politics after this current mandate or current tenure. And then the next part is really in terms of any words of advice to us fellow Haitians who are looking up to you as you've probably gone into the political spectrum more inroads than maybe I have or any one of us who are on the chat. And we're looking to be inspired to regain our voice as part of the narrative of our people moving forward. What would be your parting words of wisdom and sharing that advice with us?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do next in terms of like if I would run again. I'm trying to I see this as a really good opportunity for me to leverage my skills and just be really good at what I do. So it takes understanding people at a different level. And so I want to just master my job first and see where I go from there. And then any words of advice? I've found myself a lot of times, because I've worked in U.S. Congress on the House and the Senate. I've worked for the House of Delegates in Virginia. I've been in circles where there weren't a lot of minorities, especially in the U.S. Senate. And so, and in the campaign world as well, just having worked for state parties on coordinated campaigns, you don't find a lot of Black people in general. And so what happens is, as Jennifer mentioned, is, your narrative gets left out, your story gets left out when you're not there, because you're just you're a different perspective, even no matter what level you're in. If you're just volunteering, even, it's just a different perspective. And so I would just say to just show up, just pretty much kind of, whatever it is you want to do, reach out to people to find out what it is you can do. Because we've been on so many different levels of this, that we kind of understand the bigger picture, and maybe someone who's interested in it can't see it. Feel free to reach out. I'm at claudettpdavid@gmail.com. So feel free to reach out, or you could email me at my official account, 3f05@anc.gov. Yeah, always reach out to people to find out what your opportunities are, for people who already know, and just do it. Do what your heart desires, because that's what really brought us to where we are right now, is that we just doing something that, like, is a passion for us, and it just leads to a lot of opportunities.
Thank you. To both of you, thank you for answering our final question. And thank you for your time in being the first of our series in terms of this topic, for our audience to learn the challenges, even at the local level, of Haitian women in politics, and more importantly, sharing a specific of your journey. Both of you, as we delve into the conversation, we wanted to provide this platform to be interactive and to be kind of a sidebar chat, unfiltered. Lisa, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. So I wanted to hand it over to you for the concluding remarks, since we had you to shed some of the concluding remarks with this session. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Claudette, for your leadership, your political representation, and sharing your experience and your knowledge with the audience today. Thank you so much on behalf of AHP.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today with Jennifer and Claudette for the wonderful conversation. Thank you, ladies, for offering your guidance and your point of view, and also your future aspiration. We as AHP wish you, both ladies, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful future, and the best to everything that you do in your life. And we hope to continue this conversation in the future. Hopefully it'll be in a different format. As things are getting better, we have to hope for the best. And then we wanted to say thanks again for a lovely time with us at AHP and everyone that joined. Thank you so much, ladies. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close?
No, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, AHP, for allowing us, giving us this platform. Please feel free whenever to reach out, because politics is all about strategy. And we understand that on a personal level. So thank you so much for everyone for joining. Thank you, AHP, for having me.
Yeah, and I also just want to extend my gratitude for being a part of this conversation. It really means a lot. Just building community and connecting to the Asian community here. So thank you so much for just allowing me to be here with you all.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Claudette. We will greatly appreciate it. And Jill, thanks again for being wonderful facilitators. Everyone, have a wonderful evening until the next event. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Yes, sweetie.